Hey, what's up? Joining you from Japan. I'm here at AMLDS 2026. I'm presenting a paper on information cost, measuring task difficulty by them. So the question is, can large language models produce more information than they're given as input in terms of training data, prompting, architecture choices? And so this paper that I'm presenting is actually the first step in trying to quantify these costs so we can answer questions just like that.
Chaos theory.
Reality.
Thank you. I am George Montañez. I'm an associate professor of computer science at Harvey Mudd College near Los Angeles. And I want you to imagine with me. I want you to imagine that you are a computational biologist. You're part of a team that is trying to design a DNA binding protein. And as part of your work, you want to know how complex do I need to make this protein in order to accomplish the task that I want it to do. Really what you want to do is you want to minimize the complexity. And so you bring your computational knowledge to bear. And you realize that this is really a string recognition task, where instead of alphabetic letters, you have nucleotide letters, right? A, G, T, and C. Furthermore, you're aware of results in automata theory, such as Myhill-Nerode, which tells you that the more difficult your task, the more complex the machinery you're going to need to accomplish that task. And so you think, can the task difficulty help me here? Can it tell me how complex I need to make this protein? But then that raises an immediate question. How am I going to measure the task difficulty in this context? So in computational complexity theory, we usually measure difficulty in two ways, either in space or in time. In terms of time, we do that in the number of steps as a function of the input size. So if you've ever seen big O notation, that's what you're doing. You're measuring it in terms of the number of steps. You can also do it in the amount of space needed, the amount of memory needed to accomplish the task. And so you have these constraints on time, you have these constraints on space, but really for these knowledge type tasks, the systems that accomplish them need to have some level of sophistication and know-how baked into the structures themselves. And so what you really want to know is how much knowledge is needed to accomplish this task. But as you can tell, knowledge is hard to quantify. How am I going to quantify knowledge? So instead, we can ask how much information is needed to accomplish a task. So this gives us a different lens of trying to assess task difficulty. So let's look at an example to make this concrete. Imagine that you have 32 cards that are face down on a table, and your job is to flip over the ace of spades. And so I want to ask you, which would you rather have? So either you have the opportunity to ask me 3 yes or no questions, which I'll give you a truthful answer to, or you can get an additional 8 tries to flip over the card, right? So think about it for a second. Well, if you know about information theory, you know that if you get 3 yes or no questions, you can reduce this space down to a set of just 4 cards. So you're left with a 1 in 4 chance of being able to correctly flip the card. However, if you have 9 tries total of flipping cards, it actually raises your chance of success to 0.28. And so we can cast this in information terms. So if I get the yes-no questions, which is a type of data I'm giving you, you're left with 2 bits of information that you need, right? 1 in 4, you need 2 bits. However, if you get the extra queries, you only need 1.83 bits of information. So it actually reduced your task difficulty because you need less information now to accomplish your task. So what we notice is that data, that's something that can help you, and that's typically measured in bits, how many bits of information I'm given. But also, we can look at things like bias or priors. Maybe I'm putting a distribution over the set of things that I'm trying to discover. That can also be measured in bits. You can change your sampling method, so I can use a smarter sampling method, which increases my probability of success. Also, once again, measure that in information terms. Or even things like rule knowledge, where I'm cutting out regions of the space. I'm giving a narrowed down version of what is possible. Using information costs, this is almost like a universal currency for comparing these, what seem to be very different types of help, and comparing them on a one-to-one basis. Okay, so it's like fiat currency. That's the whole purpose why we have fiat currency, is so that way I don't have to barter with you for something you don't necessarily want. We go to a common exchange medium, which is the currency, and now I can compare directly and price things accordingly, right? So it lets you price value across totally different problem domains and help sources and compare them directly. So if you're like me, at this point you would probably think, well, why not just use probability? Because these things are based around probability, and it's true. Information and probability are interchangeable. You're essentially doing a negative log base 2 transform. So probabilities, they accumulate multiplicatively, whereas information is additive. So it's a lot easier for us humans to reason about things that are additive than there are to reason about things that are multiplicative. We're usually better at addition than we are multiplication, which is why we stick with information. Okay, so now that we have this general framework, we're going to look at things through the lens of information difficulty. We want to know how to apply this. So in the paper, I lay out a bunch of tasks that you as a researcher might run into. So for example, imagine you have n distinguishable items and you want to select one of them uniformly. What is the information cost of that selection? Well, it's just negative log base 2 of 1 over n, right? It takes log base 2 of n bits to uniquely specify one of those items. But that's assuming uniformity over the space. What if it's not uniform? What if you have some prior information? Maybe you have a distribution. Well, you can just take the probability of that item, take the negative log base 2 of that. And this, if you recognize this, this is just Shannon's surprisal, okay? What if you're not trying to just choose one specific item, but you have k different items you can choose from, and you want one of those? Well, that gives us an information cost of negative log base 2k over n. What if you have a space, and now I'm given some knowledge that eliminates part of that space, so I'm narrowing down to a subspace, and maybe it's a favorable subspace, that it increases the chances that I'm going to find the thing I want. That is just the negative log base 2 of the ratio of the reduced space to the size of the full space. And then lastly, imagine that I have some probability of accomplishing my task, and then I have a different method which raises the probability, right? So maybe I have a smarter way of doing this, a new technique, and I want to say, what is the information cost of finding this new technique? Because that in and of itself, I can't just assume it. We actually give a bound for that in the paper, and we show that any sampling strategy, at least as good as this one, is going to have this bound on it in terms of the information cost. So if it raises the probability from P to Q, then the ratio of these, this is just the difference between the original problem difficulty and the new problem difficulty. Okay, so this gives actually a conservation of information result. And if you're interested in that sort of thing, please look at the paper. It's kind of cool. This has application beyond just CS and AI. So going back to biology, imagine that you want to design a functional protein. So you're in maybe drug design or therapeutic medicine. You know that of all the potential amino acid sequences I could put together, not many of them are going to result in functionally stable proteins to accomplish a task. We actually show in this paper how to measure the information cost, the task difficulty for that task. If you're working with genetic algorithms, and you want to find a better mutation operator, something that's going to bias your method towards success, what is the information cost of that? Or if you're an engineer and you have some set of criteria for an acceptable solution and maybe you want to relax that a little bit, that in and of itself will incur an information cost. And we show in the paper how to measure that as well. Okay, more complex. Who's heard of AlphaZero or Mu0? So this is Google DeepMind, their reinforcement learning systems for playing games like Go and chess. So interestingly, AlphaZero, they gave it examples of human play. They gave it examples of chess rules, and it learned to play chess very well. Its successor system, Mu0, wasn't given those things. It wasn't given the rules of chess. It learned to infer the rules of chess through self-play. And if you look at how long it took to achieve the same ELO score, which is how you measure how good you are in chess, it took much longer, right? And so you can see from that, or you can infer from that, that knowing the rules of chess gave AlphaZero a head start. And so we want to ask, how much information did that take? So what is the information cost of obtaining such helpful, beneficial rule knowledge? That seems like a hard question to answer, right? But here's what we can do. We can actually decompose this complex task into tractable subtasks. And remember I said that information is additive? Now we can add those contributions of information. So in order to know the rules of chess, first thing I need to know is what are the legal board states, right? So we compute the information cost of learning what are the legal board states. Within the legal board states, what kind of board states do I want to end up in? I want to end up in win states, right? So then the next thing is, what are the winning states? Okay, we need to identify those from among the set of all the possible legal board states. And then lastly, if I know what states are legal, I need to know how to transition between legal board states, hopefully ending up in a winning board state. That is a little bit more difficult, but what we can do, because again, we're computer scientists, you can actually represent the game of chess as a finite state automaton. It's kind of cool. And then you can use the transition function, this particular transition function from the set of all possible transition functions will give you a bound on the information cost of identifying the correct transitions in chess. So the takeaway from this is that decomposition is the method. So if you have a composite task that's complex, you can break it down into more tractable subtasks. And we do this with chess inside the paper as an example. Lastly, I'm interested in large language models. And large language model outputs, we have things like architecture bias, training data, prompting strategy. All of these affect the probability that we're going to get good outputs from our model. Information gives us a common currency for discussing how these changes affect task difficulty, right? And we can compare them. What is more helpful than what? Furthermore, there's an open question. Can large language models produce more information than they take in terms of training data, prompting, et cetera? So this is an interesting question for me. I want to know, are these things net information generators rather than information miners or consumers? And I'm happy to tell you that the information cost framework will allow us to get answers to these. This is actually something I'm working on right now. I'm preparing this work. So, in summary, information cost is a universal bit-based currency for task difficulty. If you're interested in that and how you would apply it in your own work, please check out the paper. And I want to thank you for your time and attention, and thank you to the chair. And I'm open for questions. Thank you.
I have two questions from
Yeah.
you. I want to understand mu0 you mentioned. Is it
Yes.
again from the DeepMind?
Yes, yeah. So this is their follow-up successor system to
I don't
AlphaZero.
understand they were doing good with AlphaZero.
They were, yes.
Why they came up with mu0?
That's a great question. And so I think the motivation was to try to disambiguate what are we getting just from the self-play versus what are we getting from looking at human data. So they wanted to show that just the self-play and these self-rollouts was actually giving them some ability to learn to play chess. Or at least that's what I think, yeah.
Thank you. Another one is it like calculating the information cost you are talking about?
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned decomposition.
Yes.
So can we grade it up to other domains as well, as you mentioned chess?
I think so. So this, again, the paper starts off by laying out, I think it's like 13 different tasks that are kind of simple, building up. And then when we do it for chess, chess is worked out in the paper. So that's actually an example.
Okay, so
Yeah.
did you think over, will it be able to generalize for other domains as well?
I think so.
Okay.
This is for researchers like yourself,
I think
right?
Decomposition is
Yeah.
good enough to be
Yeah.
to go to other domains.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for those questions.
Is there an effort to link the information cost to the compute cost, like the tokens that we use to the LLMs?
Oh, that's a great question. So I haven't gotten to that stage yet. So if I understand your question correctly, let me try to say it back. So if I have some notion of the information cost for these things, can I use those almost to price what token cost should be? Oh, that's great. No, as far as I know, that hasn't been done, but that's a great thing to look at. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so like information information cost is based on the decomposition theory.
Yes, sir.
Like it is probability and also entropy and something. and how you can determine that the information is meaning or valuable for the training, for example, got a little bit also for the information should be.
So
So like how you, and what is challenging when you estimate the information cost that you.
what is challenging in that? So I think that there's maybe like two parts I can answer. So the first one, you had mentioned meaning, right? Yeah. So just because you have a certain information cost doesn't mean that that information is going to necessarily be helpful. So we can imagine that I have a space and I'm going to narrow it down to a subspace, but maybe I'm really dumb and I narrow it down to the wrong subspace. In that case, it still incurs an information cost, but it's not meaningful. It's not beneficial. So that is something that you have to take into consideration when you're doing this. The information cost is the baseline. It doesn't tell you how helpful it's going to be, but it tells you that you need at least this much information in order to get something of that level of help, if that makes sense. And then the second part is like, what is difficult about this? I think, so the part that was initially difficult is just wrapping your head around this idea that almost everything incurs an information cost. I think as researchers, a lot of times we make decisions and we add our assumptions and our biases without accounting for them. And we think, oh, our system is just doing well, but we don't take into account the biases and the architecture choices and the hyperparameter tuning and all the things we do behind the scenes that actually input information into the process. This gives us an accounting. So it's like having an honest accountant that can come through and say, well, we're actually giving this much information to begin with. So I think this would actually help in that sense.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Last question.
Information incurring costs of currency, right?
Yeah.
So there has to be some kind of a reference where from that reference you would know how much you can increase or something like that.
Yeah, like a baseline.
A basis.
Yeah.
Or you can, do you have that? Or?
Yeah, so typically with these sorts of information costs, we're discussing systems where you can have kind of better performance or worse performance and how much information is needed. A natural baseline is the unique baseline, which is maximum entropy. So in other words, uniformity, if you can support that in your space. And so if you know, for example, going back to the cards example, if I'm choosing blindfolded uniformly at random, that gives me a baseline. And now any method that I have, maybe I overheard some information, something that was helpful, that's going to potentially improve me over that baseline. So uniformity, as long as you are, again, within like a finite, discrete space, usually you could just use that as the baseline.
So you talked about OM notation and this
Yes.
space.
Yes, sir.
Were you able to observe any kind of relationship between those two and this?
Yeah. So I actually opened the paper itself, giving the example of sorting. So if you've studied sorting algorithms in school, you know that the best you can do for comparison-based sorting is O of n log n, right? It turns out that if you're looking at it from an information cost perspective, a sorted set is basically some permutation of the elements. How many permutations are there possible? N factorial. If you take log base 2 of n factorial, you use Stirling's approximation, it's essentially n log n. And so these two, so assuming that each comparison gives you one bit of information, the information cost also gives you a lower bound on the number of steps you need at the same time. And so that's one that I give in the paper again in the intro, but there's probably other connections you can make as well. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now that you've made it to the end of this video, be sure to watch this next one and like and subscribe for even more.
Chaos Theory.